Thank you so much for being here today and to welcoming our wonderful panel. I'm really delighted that energy storage made it to the agenda for today. And the reason is because when you say energy storage, it means something different to probably everybody in this audience. We've seen energy storage technologies deployed as generation, as transmission. We're seeing it happening at the distribution level. We're seeing it in the transportation sector. So today, what we're going to try to do is really focus on real projects, real on-the-ground projects that are happening today. Now, again, energy storage has been identified as being sort of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's going to solve our cybersecurity problems. It's going to extend the life of our renewable energy. It's going to help us manage our energy usage. It's going to help us, it's going to be compatible with rate structures that favor time-varying rates. It's going to increase efficiency. It's going to be cost-effective. How is it going to do all of these things? And that's why we're going to turn to our panel today. And while usually when you're trying to find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you look for a leprechaun to lead you there, we've got different kinds of green leadership today that's really going to take us there. So what I've asked each of our panelists to do is I'm going to start and ask each of them to talk a little bit about what kinds of projects they are involved in so that you understand what their mission is and what they're looking to solve. So can I start with you, John?
Sure. Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Navy's renewable energy program and what some of our energy goals are. And you heard a little bit earlier from Secretary McGinn and Secretary Mabus talk about the Navy's energy security strategy. So I'm not gonna repeat that, but just as a way of introduction, Secretary Mabus in 2014 set a 1 gigawatt renewable energy goal for us. And that was a pretty aggressive goal. And we met that goal. And how we met that goal was we established 3 simple business models. And I don't have time to go into that now, but they're three simple business models that move at the speed of industry and enable us to make fast decisions. And by doing that, we achieved the Secretary's 1 gigawatt goal. But along the way, we learned that as we were adding renewable energy to our power portfolio, we could achieve resiliency through energy infrastructure upgrades and battery storage. And that was something that was so surprising to us that the Secretary Mabus said, hey, I'm not going to disestablish REPO after they hit the 1 gigawatt goal. You guys are going to keep charging on and focus resiliency. And so one of the first projects that we hit on was we learned that through a renewable energy project, we could enhance our resiliency and really attack and improve our kill chain and enable us to put steel on target more effectively. Because that's what we're about, really, is the Navy's mission is to fight and win our nation's wars and maintain freedom of the seas. So what we did was at a naval weapons station in Seal Beach, we looked at land that we were growing strawberries on. Though we had to grow strawberries on there, we couldn't develop that land for anything else because it was an explosive arc. You can't put buildings in an explosive arc, but you can put strawberries. Well, what we learned is you can also put batteries. And so we contracted with a developer to build a 50 to 100 megawatt hour utility scale battery project. We don't charge them rent for that battery project. And instead of rent, what we got from this deal is we got 500 kilowatts of solar power behind the meter, so it directly reduces our energy costs, tied to another battery for uninterrupted power supply with microgrid controls to enable all the critical facilities at the Naval Weapons Station to offload ammunition to ships that are embarking for a tour in the Pacific Fleet, irregardless of what's going on with the grid. So in a very tangible way, we're using batteries to enhance our resiliency and our capability as warfighters. Another project that I'd like to talk about just real quickly as an example is what we're doing in Crane. At Crane, we did a 24 megawatt PV array with Duke, and while we were out there, we learned that all of the Navy's submarine batteries are located in Crane, Indiana. And a lot of folks will say, hey, why are they at Crane, Indiana? I'm going to tell you something that's top secret, so don't tell anybody. It's a secret submarine base. No, actually, Crane, Indiana is the center of excellence for the Navy's battery program. And there's a lot of federal, the Battery Innovation Center is out there. There's a lot of high-tech battery stuff that is in Indiana. That's where we test our batteries. We're looking, and in fact, I was meeting with the team yesterday at repurposing these submarine batteries because we know that by 2019, we're going to have 44 megawatts worth of energy storage at Crane in the form of batteries. We're looking to repurpose that to provide uninterrupted power supply or improved power quality for the laboratories that are at Crane, Indiana. So I got a bunch more projects, but you don't have enough time to hear all my stories, so I'll stop there.
We'll come back to those.
I look forward to your questions.
Kevin?
So we don't have a lot of land in GSA's inventory. We've got a lot of buildings, and we're interested in figuring out how we can maximize the effectiveness of our commitment. And our commitment is that our entire building will be 100% renewable electricity by 2025. And we are firmly committed to achieving that across the entire inventory of over 200 million square feet of space. Right now, what we've got mostly is thermal storage. We're interested in expanding that from ice and water to something a little bit broader. If I had a dream, I would put it out there and say that I would like to replace 75 to 100% of the diesel generators that we use for resiliency and standby power with something that didn't pollute, wasn't so expensive, and had better than a 60% success rate in actually charging up when you needed them. It's worth noting that no diesel generators after Hurricane Katrina were working after 3 days because there was no diesel supply. And of course, then we have to throw away the diesel fuel after a year because it's no good, and that's really kind of wasteful. So diesel generators are an incredible waste machine. I would like to substitute that with a saving machine. The technology, I hope, is out there. We're issuing a request for information in a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how long it takes us to get the final language through. But within the next 2 weeks, in the month of September, asking industry to respond. We're giving a set of buildings with incredibly detailed load data on the demand side, and we want to see what industry is going to come back with. We are not limiting it to batteries. We're not limiting it to thermal. We're just opening it up. We want storage. For example, we manage demand response really well right now. But one of the ways we do it on a day like today, and by the way, I see an awful lot of people in jackets and ties out there. We need to learn to dress for the weather, sir. Which, at least I got halfway there. I'm not in a short sleeve shirt.
Oh, that's the guys in the Pentagon.
It's 100 degrees. In the Pentagon, there was a president who actually decreed it, and it worked. And military uniforms in the summer, I believe, are short sleeve shirts.
Yeah, but for civilians.
Yep. Follow the military. Anyway, so dress for the weather, but also demand response, we do it a lot by really old techniques like pre-cooling the building. Well, pre-cooling the building is kind of nice. It's good for the tenants, but it also consumes a lot of energy. It just happens to be a little bit cheaper. So we'd like to get demand response better managed. We'd like to get emergency response better managed. We'd like to get resiliency better managed, and that's what we're really looking to expand. And again, I think we were talking a little bit beforehand about sort of like the old-fashioned technologies like solar thermal compared to PV. Everybody loves PV because it's sexy, but solar thermal is relatively inexpensive and really effective. Thermal storage isn't a bad solution either. So I think we need to be looking at, as our president says, an all-of-the-above strategy in storage, but also one that is creative and really maximizes the needs. We're working with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I have my beautiful prop here. And what this chart basically shows is that the only thing that looks like it's cost-effective from a return on investment point of view is a combination of photovoltaic and battery storage that does, some work there with the ability to potentially have a resiliency component, but the resilience component don't pencil out. And the reason they don't pencil out is because we don't actually do return on investment calculations in a sensible financial way for things like diesel generators. We just say we need them, we know we have to have uninterrupted, and we don't care what it costs. And we need to change the dynamic so we care what everything costs, and we balance those things. And I am very hopeful that storage of all kinds can begin to overtake this sort of laissez-faire. We've always done it with diesel generators, and we don't really need storage because, you know, it comes from the grid. We need to change that whole idea. And I'm hopeful that between your RFIs that we talked about before and ours, we'll begin to see some very creative ideas from industry.
Before I move on to Matt, let me there's a lot of information coming out here, and we will go back and we're going to dig in deeper on some of these specifics of how these projects materialized. But let me remind you that if you have questions, write them down, start passing them to the sides. We have our helpers to collect questions, and we will try to take some questions at the end. Matt, you're with the Energy Storage Association, so a little bit different. You're not deploying your own projects. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the industry and how you see it relating to some of the things we're hearing about here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much, Donna. Thank you to GWCEQ for bringing all this together as well. I'm glad that both of you focused on resiliency, or at least brought some of that into the conversation, because this gets into kind of one of the underpinning challenges for energy storage on the grid. You know, the resiliency, the Navy has a value for that. You know, they have a defined, it needs to be on. You know, these systems need to perform. Many of them are mission critical. They build probably 60–70% of the microgrids in the United States are built by the Department of Defense because they have a value for that reliability, that resiliency. We don't have that baked into our general system, though. You know, what is it worth to you if your lights don't go off? I mean, on average, people's lights go off a few hours a year. For me, as you know, a young guy living in a city, my lights go off fine. I light a candle, play some cards. It's not a big deal. But you know, so I don't have a financial stake in resiliency. And this gets into valuing how we value energy technologies on the system. My organization is sort of at the intersection of technology, markets, and policy. And so we work in kind of all three of those realms. But our biggest challenge is really how do we derive and create markets that are able to value the performance of these new energy systems. So as an example, there's a place called PJM, and I'll talk a little bit about grid scale stuff, and then we'll kind of move into more the customer sited and behind the meter type applications. PJM, biggest energy market in the world, theoretically is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, but actually covers some more parts of the country. A lot of big cities in that area. They have this thing called frequency response. The grid is always balanced out. In microseconds, we're trying to track exactly what's happening on the grid. We have systems that are big natural gas systems, take them about 5 minutes to respond to a grid signal. There's a big derivation in the frequency of the grid. An energy storage system can respond, some of them are sub-millisecond, most of them are a couple of seconds to respond to something. And we have to think on a big scale like this, over this massive geography, how much can change in 4.5, 5 minutes? The difference between those two response times. The Super Bowl is terrible this year, everyone decides to go out to dinner. Massive drop in electricity load. But we have systems that can't respond that quickly, which means we're operating the grid very inefficiently. The problem is, if you operate the grid more efficiently in an energy market, you use less energy, and you're paid in dollars per kilowatts. So if you do something better, more efficiently, you'll actually get paid less, because that's how our system is basically designed. And in a lot of ways, these are the challenges. We have sort of a number of tools in the tool bag, but we don't necessarily know how to value them on the system. And these kind of translate to behind the meter and customer-sited solutions. So I would say, you know, when we're talking for GSA, for DoD, for federal government, you know, performance is key. Performance is where you really want to focus and how we can create better, higher performing systems, and energy storage is a component of that. We've touched on a couple of the technologies, batteries, flywheels, thermal energy storage, but there's a wide range of technologies that can do this. There's a company that's working on pulling trains up a hill, and you slowly let it creep back down the hill. That's stored energy. You can compress millions of square feet of air into an underground cavern. That's compressed air energy storage. You release it, it drives a turbine. So while there are a lot of technologies, I think the big thing that we should look at is storage is a service. It's a service you can provide on the grid. And our grid is quickly moving towards, our grid system, our infrastructure, our markets are quickly moving towards an energy services type economy. And that's really changing the dynamic quite a bit. So with those changes, we anticipate more value to be placed on performance and value delivered. And that bodes very well for energy storage and is part of why it's considered a big part of our energy future. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Let's circle back a little bit to the projects, and I'm interested in how you sell these things internally to your organization. So for the folks out here who are going to come back inspired and say, yes, we've got to do this at my agency, how, in some cases, resiliency, I've heard, was a big factor, environmental concerns was a factor, perhaps cost effectiveness. I'm not sure how that balances. What are the ways in which you internally say, this is the performance I'm looking for, and then come back and show, this is what I got. I got value out of doing this kind of a project.
Let me jump on that first and tell you a little story. I got lots of stories. So these projects sell themselves. Once what we did in Seal Beach and the installation commander was able to talk to the other skippers about what he's getting and how it's going to ensure mission operation, that lit on fire within the Pacific Fleet. And so I'm working on a completely different project with Hawaiian Electric in Oahu. Well, the skipper at Barking Sands Missile Range in Kauai hears that I'm there. He sends a plane. This has never happened to me before, right? So he sends a plane to come pick me up on Oahu, to take me to Kauai, to tell me about the electrical problems he's having, and a battery is the solution. So for all you vendors out there, we're going to release an RFI this fall and have an industry day in Kauai in the fall to talk about how we can do battery storage to improve the resiliency of the operations out there. And so for us, these projects sell themselves. What I had was I ponied up the money for the environmental planning so the project, so it'll be a clean slate. But the mission commanders are coming out of the woodwork to participate in these projects. They just sell themselves. And so the key is to come to events like these. What I really need is the mission commanders are all in. I need the participation of industry. Much like you guys have said, I need you guys to come to these RFIs and enter into a discussion with me about what's the best way to employ the batteries so that we can get the most resiliency for the land we're offering.
So you saw it deliver what you expected in spades and sold itself.
Completely.
Fantastic. How about you, Kevin? Tougher time?
I mean, maybe a little bit. We don't have a really dramatic sort of starter project that we can get out there, other than the thermal storage ones. So we're looking for really developing the return on investment. That's the easiest way to do it. And sort of the combination PV storage and demand response and sort of all of that makes tremendous amount of sense economically. What I'm also looking for is to go one step further and sell it on with the social cost of carbon included in that, because that's actually working, because people are understanding that there are unaccounted for expenses that we as a society are actually incurring, and we should and can take those into account when we're making decisions about how we move forward. We're seeing that grid-based electricity buys are making tremendous sense. We're getting, in the Capital Solar Challenge in DC, we got electricity at 3.99 cents a kilowatt hour. That's half what you're paying residential in DC. So we're seeing that the grid-based version of things is going here. What we want to do is be able to sort of accumulate all of our different assets and let people come up with, what's the really good return on investment story, all things considered. And I think that will make the difference. It's not really that hard to sell it, and especially if you're coupling it with power purchase agreements or any number of other things like energy savings performance contracts, you have a demonstrated track record of what's going forward. It's not that tough to sell. What we're really looking for is, as you said, we're looking for industry to come up with the creative solutions.
Okay. And Matt, just to follow up on that, is this consistent with what you're seeing across the industry? Are these projects essentially selling themselves, or?
I think that it varies based on location, and that's one of the big challenges in the U.S. is, not only do we have 50 states, but we have 9 ISOs, we have, county taxes vary on property. There's so many nuances to where you put these systems. And then on top of that, utility rates vary from every single utility in many jurisdictions. So where costs in places like Hawaii, Alaska, New York City, San Francisco may be higher, in different parts of the country it can be incredibly inexpensive. Where energy storage brings in value today is really on the behind-the-meter technologies, is around what's called energy arbitrage, and then also things like time of use rates. If you can, it's a buy low, sell high mentality. If you either have your own PV or you can buy inexpensive electricity, then you can use that at a different time when electricity may be more expensive. Not a lot of places have time of use rates, though. There's a kind of scattering around the country where those exist. There's another thing called a demand charge, which is in effect represents the infrastructure it takes to get energy to you. It's based on your peak consumption. If you can shave your peak down, you can pay less in demand charges. And for a lot of big commercial and industrial buildings, demand charges is most of what you're going to pay in the states and jurisdictions that have these. So I think that with big buying power, the federal government can obviously change the arithmetic a little bit, but it can be challenging to make it purely on that equation. If the only thing we're saying is the arbitrage value, buying something and then saving 3 cents on some energy you had later in the day, it can be difficult. But if we can bring some of these other value streams in, then we can do some interesting things. I'll point out really quick, one of these kind of interesting applications is virtual power plants. So if you have one of these systems, you can arbitrage your own energy. If you have 50 of them spread out throughout a territory, you can link all of those together, and now all of a sudden you have a much bigger system. You have maybe a multi-megawatt system, and that system collectively can have a bigger impact on the grid and can create another revenue stream as well. So there are some companies that are really exploring those virtual power plant applications. But I think if you're looking at just one site, one installation, the mathematics it's going to vary based on your region, your utility rates, and some other factors in there too.
Fantastic. I do want to talk a little bit about the whole acquisition process. I think it's really important both for those of you that are acquiring and those of you that have something you would like to sell in the audience to understand what are the difficulties, what do we need to address. When you go out into the market, are you getting back the products you want to see? Are you hearing feedback from vendors about, well, we need, you ask for capital, I've got something that needs expenses. Are there problems, accounting type problems that have to be overcome? And, are you seeing what you're expecting out of the market? Are you getting the kinds of solutions you want?
So
either of you?
For us, we've got 4 RFIs on the street, and we're going to have 4 industry days next week to explore with industry this is in southwestern United States. It's in San Diego, Coronado, Corona, California, and Camp Pendleton. So there are 4 industry days, and the RFIs are in Fed Biz Ops. And for us, what we found is that we needed to offer not the standard Navy lease or the standard Navy contract. We need to tailor that contract to enable our partner to get financing. And so really, it's the cost of equity that's driving these projects and enabling us to have the success we have. So that's the first thing, is understand industry, make sure that you've got the right acquisition vehicle that works with industry and supports the cost of equity so these projects can be financed. And then lastly, we've got to move through the decision process quickly because these guys are tying up capital and we can't string them along for 3 years while we negotiate it. And so we know that's a problem, and we're working on fixing it. And I tell you what, nobody's leading the way harder than Secretary McGinn and Secretary Mavis. So that I think we're getting better in the Navy, but we can still improve.
I'm so glad you hit on all of those issues because that's exactly what I've heard back from industry in the past. And hearing that you're addressing those is spot on. Kevin, what's your experience been?
Well, I'll tell you, my experience, or GSA's experience in particular, is that the procurement process is beset and bedeviled by the fact that people who are dealing with the federal government are afraid of the terms and conditions and therefore are reticent and risk averse. And then we have an entire procurement industry within the federal government that is trained from the very first day to be risk averse. And so you get 2 parties to a contract that are trying to avoid risk. And so the big problem for us is how do we encourage people to take a reasonable amount of risk in any of these procurements. So this is a problem we've solved with energy savings performance contracts through industry days and a number of other things like that, and sort of really just managing the process really well. What I would say to industry is very straightforward, and that is, don't look at a federal contract that comes out on the street or an RFI that comes into FedBiz Ops and say, oh, it's cast in stone, we can't do anything about it. If only they would change this little thing, I could get financing at an extra, 500 basis points and make the whole deal work. Ask the questions, propose the answer. The reason we're using RFIs so much now is because we want to find out that information. The second thing I would say to industry is that if you think that you've got some kind of secret financing deal that makes you have a competitive advantage, you're smoking something, because everybody else has the same financing deal. You don't have any secrets. Everybody has the same access to the same kind of financing, to the same kind of ideas. So go ahead, put the ideas out there. Let us take advantage of them and open the procurement to that. And then what we're trying to do inside the government is make sure that the procurements are equally open, that we get the contracting officers willing to listen. Program managers understand that, and we're leading the decision-making to be much, much more open than I would say even 5 years ago we were to new ideas that we're receiving back in the course of procurement. And finally, and you said it before, but Benjamin Franklin also said it, time is money. If we don't move fast, we lose money. It's that simple. And we can, John Powers said it in the first session today, if you sit on a deal for 6 months on the government side, everybody's financing or partners or everything unravels, because nobody can sit around waiting to deliver something for 6 months and not have any assurance that it's actually going to materialize. So speed is really, really important on the government side. Not easy for us, but we think we can do it much better than we have been.
Matt, are they answering the kinds of concerns that you've heard from your members? Is the market getting better in terms of finding this marriage between the government contracting process and what the private sector has to offer?
I think there are still challenges. I don't think anyone would deny that there are some challenges in kind of translating an industry into sort of federal government speak, I think, in some ways. And so I know that there have been many successful projects, but there are also projects that have run into challenges as well. This is all new, though. Energy storage is a new thing. It's a new entity. It doesn't really fit neatly into any asset classification. Sometimes it looks like a generator. It pushes electrons out. Sometimes it looks like a load. You got to charge it up sometimes. On the grid, it can look like infrastructure. So it's a different thing to acquire, and so we're just starting to see the first PPAs for energy storage evolving in California. We're just getting through the process, or not just, but over the last few years, have got through the process of answering RFPs for utilities out in California as well. So this is a learning experience, I think, in a lot of ways. In terms of rapidity, or in terms of rapidness is the right word there, I'd add one other thing too. There was a bit of an emergency in California, and still is, because of Aliso Canyon. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's a large natural gas reservoir that started leaking and no longer could be relied upon. So there was worries about future brownouts, blackouts, energy shortages. In what the PUC said, CPUC out in California, said go out there and get energy storage to help solve this, because we know we'll have that reliable asset on the grid. But the other part of that was get it before December 31st. So there is no energy technology out there that can provide that type of capacity, provide that reliability, that can be sought, procured, contracted, installed, turned on within 6 months. And so this is actually a big challenge for the industry as well. This is very new to everyone and kind of moving through that. So in terms of rapid procurement, energy storage offers opportunities there. But had that happened anywhere other than California, it would have never come together that quickly. And part of that is because the regulatory environment's structured to understand these things, and we have experience with the RFPs. So I think it's great that there are a lot of RFIs and RFPs out there. It is a learning experience on both sides. And it's great to engage and kind of keep it moving forward.
We are almost out of time, and I'm sorry I didn't get to questions here. So if you had any, I will urge you to catch people afterwards. Lightning round. You've got about 5 seconds each on this. What would you like to see changed in terms of policy to make this whole process work better? Thoughts?
I'd like to see demand response so we can monitor, or the monetization of ancillary services to produce a revenue stream for batteries.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a recent Supreme Court ruling that held up support for demand response as well.
Correct.
So it's been great to see that as well.
Any other comments on policy?
Yeah, I'd like to see us price resiliency the same way we price storage.
Excellent. Yes, because right now we don't really put a value on how long the asset lasts, but PJM is trying.
A little bit, yeah. I would say the biggest thing is all source RFPs, and this goes beyond what we're talking about today, but also at the utility scale. If you're procuring a technology and you say, I need that technology, you may already be wrong. You may already be headed in the wrong direction. So I would say look at performance and value delivered, procure that. I need something that does X, that's what you should get. And while you should be aware of the technology, you should be open to many technologies.
Well, thank you so much to our fabulous panel. This has really been enlightening to me, and I hope to you. Thank you.